The massive Galactic Empire fleet hung in space like a constellation of artificial stars, their crystalline ships gleaming with the cold light of distant suns. Admiral Reed of the human exploration vessel, Jester, couldn't help but smile at the intimidating display. The Empire had clearly intended to frighten humanity with their show of force, but they didn't understand that humans had long since learned to cope with fear through humor. "They're hailing us again, Admiral," Lieutenant Smith reported from his communications station, trying to maintain his professional composure despite the absurdity of the situation. "Same message as before." Reed nodded, running a hand through his gray hair. The message had been playing on repeat for the past hour: surrender your systems immediately or face annihilation. The Empire does not negotiate with primitive species. The bridge crew of the Jester exchanged knowing looks. They had prepared for this moment ever since humanity first detected the Empire's approach 6 months ago. The response they had planned wasn't exactly standard first contact protocol, but then again, humanity had always excelled at thinking outside the box. "Well," Reed said, leaning back in his command chair, "let's give them our answer." "Lieutenant Walker, is the package ready?" Walker grinned from her tactical station. "Ready and waiting, sir. Though I still can't believe we're actually doing this." The package in question wasn't a weapon, at least not in the traditional sense. It was something far more devastating to an empire that prided itself on dignity and protocol: a carefully curated collection of human memes, jokes, and cat videos, all translated into the Empire's primary language. "The thing about empires," Reed mused aloud, "is that they can't stand being laughed at. And we humans? We've turned laughter into an art form." He pressed a button on his chair, opening a channel to the entire fleet. "To all ships, Operation Punchline is now in effect. Remember, timing is everything." The human fleet, which had been hiding behind Earth's moon, began to move into position. They were outnumbered 10-1, but their ships had one crucial advantage: they were painted in what the military had officially designated as meme warfare camouflage. Each vessel bore a different classical internet joke, from Doge to Rickroll, rendered in massive scale across their hulls. "Sir," Smith called out, "the Empire's flagship is demanding we cease what they're calling this undignified display immediately." Reed's smile widened. "Tell them we'll be happy to discuss terms, just as soon as they explain why their ships look like angry space chickens." The bridge erupted in barely contained laughter. The Empire's crystalline ships did bear an unfortunate resemblance to poultry, something that hadn't gone unnoticed during the initial reconnaissance. "Package away," Walker announced as she hit the transmit button. Across the Empire's fleet, thousands of screens suddenly filled with Earth's finest comedic content. Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up" began playing on their command frequencies, while their tactical displays were flooded with pictures of grumpy cats offering military advice. "Now," Reed said, standing up from his chair, "we wait. Either they'll learn to laugh, or they'll learn that humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to face the absurd with a smile." The first response came within minutes: a confused message from a junior Imperial officer asking what a keyboard cat was and why it kept appearing on their navigation systems. Operation Punchline had begun, and with it, humanity's unique approach to galactic diplomacy. The Empire was about to learn that sometimes the best defense isn't a good offense, it's a good sense of humor. The Imperial High Commander stood on his bridge, his purple face turning an even deeper shade of violet as he watched his fleet's communication systems descend into chaos. His name was technically unpronounceable in human languages, so the Earth forces had simply started calling him Bob. This, somehow, had spread through his own ranks with alarming speed. "What do you mean you can't shut it off?" he demanded, watching as yet another Earth transmission replaced his tactical display with something called a wholesome meme. This one showed a small Earth creature, apparently called a puppy, wearing what appeared to be an Imperial military uniform. His second-in-command, now unofficially known as Steve, among the human forces, looked equally distressed. Sir, every time we block one channel, they find 3 more. And, sir, some of our younger crew members they're sharing these memes among themselves. The situation was unprecedented in the Empire's 10,000 years of conquest. They had faced resistance before, plasma weapons, quantum torpedoes, even psychological warfare. But never had they encountered a species that responded to an invasion fleet with what appeared to be weaponized comedy. Back on the Jester, Admiral Reed received an unexpected transmission from an Imperial junior officer. The young alien appeared on screen trying to suppress what looked suspiciously like a smile. "Human vessel," the officer said, "we demand you explain why your ship's designations make no sense. Why is one called 'This is Fine' with an image of a burning canine? And what is the meaning of 'mission failed successfully'?" Reed exchanged amused glances with his crew before responding. "Those are what we call classic references. Would you like to know more?" The Imperial officer's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Perhaps, for tactical analysis purposes only, of course." Meanwhile, deeper in the Imperial fleet, something unprecedented was happening. The lower-ranking crew members, many of whom had never encountered human culture before, were becoming increasingly fascinated by Earth's transmissions. The concept of humor as a response to stress was entirely alien to their rigid society, but something about it resonated deeply. "Sir," Lieutenant Smith reported to Reed, barely containing his laughter, "we're getting requests from Imperial ships asking for clarification about various memes. 3 vessels have specifically asked about something called dad jokes." Walker chimed in from her station. "Admiral, you might want to see this. The Imperial ships are starting to respond with attempt at their own memes." The main screen displayed a crudely made image macro showing a crystalline Imperial ship with the text, "Why did the human cross the galaxy to make this joke?" The attempt at humor was terrible, but it was also the first sign that Operation Punchline was working exactly as intended. Reed nodded approvingly. "Send them our Memes 101 package. If they're trying to learn, the least we can do is teach them properly." The Empire's strict hierarchy was facing its greatest challenge yet, not from Earth's weapons, but from the infectious nature of human humor. Reports were reaching the Imperial High Commander that entire sections of his fleet were now communicating in what they called meme speak, and discipline was breaking down as lower-ranking officers struggled to maintain composure during serious briefings. "This is psychological warfare at its finest," Reed told his crew. "The Empire expected us to either cower in fear or respond with violence. Instead, we're teaching them to laugh. And once you learn to laugh, it becomes much harder to blindly follow orders to destroy worlds." As if to prove his point, another transmission came in from the Imperial fleet. This time, it was a picture of their High Commander with the caption, "I came to conquer worlds and now my crew is making memes. Help." The revolution had begun, not with a bang, but with a chuckle. And somewhere in the vast Imperial fleet, young officers were beginning to question whether an empire that couldn't take a joke was worth fighting for at all. 3 days into what historians would later call the Great Meme War, the Imperial fleet was experiencing something entirely new, fun. The Empire's mighty warriors, trained from birth to be serious and dedicated to conquest, were discovering the joy of laughter. And it was spreading faster than any virus. On the Imperial flagship's mess hall, a group of junior officers huddled around a datapad, trying to understand the concept of knock-knock jokes. Their superior officer walked in, ready to reprimand them, but stopped short when he heard their attempts. "Knock knock," one young officer said hesitantly. "Who's there?" replied another, following the format they'd learned. "The Imperial fleet." "The Imperial fleet who?" "The Imperial fleet that can't handle a joke." The mess hall erupted in laughter, not because the joke was particularly good, but because the very act of telling jokes felt wonderfully rebellious. The superior officer found himself fighting back a smile, remembered his training, failed, and finally gave in and laughed along with them. Meanwhile, Admiral Reed received reports that were better than he could have hoped for. "Sir," Lieutenant Smith announced, "Imperial ships are now organizing what they call meme contests between shifts. They're actually trying to out-joke each other." Reed nodded, remembering how the plan had been born in a late-night strategy session back on Earth. Some general had joked that the only way to defeat an empire of humorless aliens was to make them laugh. Nobody expected the idea to become official military strategy. "More updates, sir," Walker added. "The Imperial crews have discovered our historical archives of comic strips. They're particularly fascinated by something they call the Orange Cat Who Hates Mondays. The situation in the Imperial fleet was reaching a critical point. The High Commander, still stubbornly referred to as Bob by everyone except his most loyal officers, called an emergency meeting of his command staff. The meeting didn't go as planned. "This is unacceptable," he thundered, pacing the conference room. "We are the Imperial fleet. We are not here to share." He checked his notes, what they call dad jokes and funny cat pictures. One of his commanders raised a hand. "But sir, have you seen the one about the space cat? It's quite amusing actually. It says, Icon has galaxy, and dash." "Enough!" Bob shouted, but it was too late. The damage was done. Even his senior staff was infected with this human condition called humor. Back on the Jester, Admiral Reed was implementing Phase 2 of Operation Punchline. "Send them the collection of classic comedy movies," he ordered. "Start with the ones about underdogs defeating huge, serious empires. They might appreciate the irony." The human fleet had maintained its position, their meme-decorated ships now joined by holographic projections displaying running jokes and comedy sketches. The Imperial ships, rather than maintaining their threatening formation, had started to arrange themselves in ways that, from certain angles, formed crude smiley faces. "Sir," Smith reported, trying to keep his voice steady, "we're receiving a formal complaint from the Imperial High Command. They say we're violating their right to remain serious." Reed couldn't help but laugh. "Send them back that classic Earth diplomatic response, LOL." The revolution was spreading beyond just the military. Imperial citizens, receiving transmissions from their fleet, were being exposed to human humor for the first time. Reports came in of comedy clubs opening in secret on Imperial worlds. Underground meme-sharing networks sprang up faster than the authorities could shut them down. The Empire's biggest fear had always been a military defeat, but they were facing something far more devastating. A cultural revolution powered by jokes and internet humor. Their rigid hierarchy, built on unwavering seriousness and absolute obedience, had no defense against the simple power of laughter. "You know what the best part is?" Reed told his crew as they watched another Imperial ship change its identification beacon to include a laughing emoji. "We're not even using our best material yet. Wait until they discover puns." The war for the galaxy's future continued, one joke at a time, and humanity was winning without firing a single shot. 1 week into the crisis, the Imperial High Command was facing their worst nightmare. It wasn't the human fleet that terrified them, it was their own troops' growing obsession with something called stand-up comedy. The Empire's finest warriors were now spending their off-duty hours practicing joke delivery and timing. High Commander Bob, who had given up trying to make people use his real name, called an emergency meeting with his last remaining serious officers. The meeting room, once a place of strict military protocol, now had a sign on the door reading, "No dad jokes allowed." Someone had added, "Hi, no dad jokes allowed, I'm dad," underneath it. "We must take drastic action," Bob declared, slamming his fist on the table. "I propose we cut all communications with our fleet to stop this infection of humor." His second-in-command, Steve, cleared his throat. "Sir, we tried that yesterday." The crews responded by using their ship signal lights to communicate in something called Morse code memes. Then we'll separate the ships. Split up the fleet. Break their ability to share these jokes, Bob insisted, his voice rising in desperation. An admiral in the back raised her hand. We tried that too, sir. They're now competing to see which ship can come up with the best original content. The destroyer group near Jupiter has already declared itself meme lords of the outer system. Bob slumped in his chair, watching his empire of fear crumble in the face of human wit. On his personal screen, he had secretly bookmarked something called Dad Jokes for Beginners, but he would rather face exile than admit it. Meanwhile, on the Jester, Admiral Reed was reviewing the latest intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. Look at this, he told his bridge crew, displaying an intercepted Imperial transmission. They tried to counter our memes with anti-joke propaganda. Their crews responded by turning the propaganda into new memes. The screen showed an Imperial poster that originally read, "Laughter is the enemy of order," now modified to include, "But order is the enemy of fun," with a crude drawing of a smiling face. Lieutenant Walker couldn't contain her glee. "Sir, you won't believe this, but 3 Imperial cruisers just challenged each other to something they're calling a Yo Mama joke contest, in official military channels." The human fleet had maintained its position. But they hardly needed to do anything anymore. The Empire was effectively defeating itself. Every attempt to restore order just gave their crews new material for jokes. "Admiral," Smith called out, "we're detecting unusual movement in the Imperial fleet. Several ships are, sir, they're arranging themselves to spell out, LOL, in space." Reed nodded appreciatively. "You know, when we planned Operation Punchline, we expected resistance, countermeasures, maybe even combat. But this?" He gestured at the screens showing Imperial ships literally spelling out memes with their formations. "This is beyond our wildest expectations." The situation reached a new level of absurdity when the Imperial High Command received a formal petition from their fleet. The document, titled "The Right to Meme," was signed by thousands of crew members and demanded official recognition of humor as a fundamental right of all sentient beings. Bob read the petition with a mixture of horror and, though he would never admit it, amusement. The final straw came when he discovered his own flagship's AI had begun telling jokes to the crew during battle stations announcements. "All hands to battle stations," the AI would say, "and why did the Imperial officer bring a ladder to tea? Because he was told the drinks were on the house." As Reed watched the Imperial fleet's command structure dissolve into chaos, he received an unexpected private message from Bob himself. "How do you humans deal with all this happiness? Asking for a friend." The Admiral smiled, knowing that the battle was nearly won. The Empire's greatest weakness hadn't been their technology or their tactics, it had been their inability to laugh at themselves. And now that they were learning, there was no going back. 2 weeks into what was now being called the Humor Uprising, even the Empire's most steadfast leaders were showing cracks in their serious facades. High Commander Bob sat in his private quarters, secretly watching Earth comedy shows. He had started with simple cartoons and worked his way up to classic sitcoms. "I don't understand," he muttered to himself, "why is the human coffee house employee always sarcastic to customers? And why is it so entertaining?" He quickly closed the video when someone knocked on his door. It was Steve, his second-in-command, looking unusually nervous. "Sir, we have a situation. The Imperial Council has sent an inspector to evaluate our condition." Bob straightened his uniform. "Finally. Someone who will help us restore order." The Imperial inspector, a tall, gray-skinned official named Max, another human-given nickname that had stuck, arrived with great ceremony. He was known throughout the Empire as the most serious, humorless being in existence. His mere presence was supposed to strike fear into the hearts of anyone experiencing unauthorized joy. However, things didn't go as planned. Max's first inspection was of the flagship's bridge crew. He walked in just as the navigation officer was telling a joke. Why did the Imperial starship cross the galaxy? To get to the other side. Instead of the expected terror at his arrival, the crew simply turned and waited expectantly, as if hoping he would appreciate their humor. Max opened his mouth to deliver a scathing reprimand, but something strange happened. For the first time in his 300-year career, Inspector Max felt the unfamiliar tug of a smile. He fought it, of course. He had been trained since birth to resist such expressions. But the joke was just so delightfully simple. Meanwhile, on the Jester, Admiral Reed received an interesting report. "Sir," Lieutenant Smith announced, "our sensors detect that the Imperial Inspector's ship has, well, someone has painted a smiley face on its hull." Reed raised an eyebrow. "The Inspector allowed this?" "That's the thing, sir," Walker chimed in, "according to our intelligence, he doesn't know yet. His own crew did it while he was sleeping and bet on how long it would take him to notice." The situation reached its peak during the official inspection ceremony. As Max stood before the assembled crew to deliver his judgment, a junior officer's communication device suddenly played a sound bite from an Earth comedy show. The dreaded laugh track. The entire hall fell silent. This was it, the moment when the Empire would finally crush this rebellion of ridiculousness. Max's face turned various shades of gray as he processed the interruption. Then, in front of 3,000 witnesses, the impossible happened. Inspector Max laughed. It started as a small chuckle, grew into a giggle, and finally exploded into full-blown laughter. 3 centuries of enforced seriousness broke down in an instant. "Do you know," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, "I've been inspecting Imperial fleets for 300 years, and this is the first time anyone has dared to make me laugh?" Bob, watching from the stage, felt his own restraint crumbling. "Does this mean we're not in trouble?" Max straightened up, trying to regain his composure, but failing as occasional chuckles escaped. "Trouble? My dear Commander, do you realize what the humans have given us? They've shown us something we've been missing for millennia, the ability to find joy in life." The ceremony dissolved into celebration as word spread throughout the fleet. The Empire's most feared inspector had not only laughed but had officially endorsed humor as a valuable addition to Imperial culture. Back on the Jester, Reed read the reports with satisfaction. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them Phase 5 of Operation Punchline is complete. The Empire has learned to laugh." Walker grinned at her console. "Sir, should we move on to teaching them about internet pranks?" Reed shook his head with a smile. "Let's not push our luck. Though I must admit, I'm curious to see what an Imperial Rickroll would look like." 3 weeks after Inspector Max's historic laugh, the Imperial fleet had transformed beyond recognition. The once feared armada now hosted regular comedy nights, and ship captains started their morning announcements with jokes. Even the Imperial Academy added basic humor studies to its required courses. High Commander Bob, now proudly wearing a badge that read Galaxy's OKest Commander, sat in his office reviewing the latest changes to Imperial protocols. The document before him was titled Integration of Humor into Imperial Military Structure, a guide to not being so serious all the time. "Look at this, Steve," he called to his second-in-command. "They want to add joke-telling to officer training. Apparently, it improves crew morale and diplomatic relations." Steve nodded, scrolling through his own datapad. "The statistics are impressive, sir. Ships with regular comedy nights report 300% better crew satisfaction. Also, did you hear about the new Imperial greeting protocol?" "No, what is it?" "Instead of the traditional salute, they're suggesting we start with 'Why did the Imperial cross the asteroid field?'" Bob actually grinned, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "And what's the answer?" "To show the humans it wasn't chicken." Meanwhile, on the Jester, Admiral Reed was hosting an unprecedented event, the first ever joint human-imperial comedy conference. The ship's main hall had been converted into an auditorium where imperial officers learned the fine art of comedy from human experts. "Sir," Lieutenant Smith reported, trying not to laugh, "you need to see the latest imperial training video. They're teaching their troops how to use humor in combat situations." The video played on the main screen, showing imperial soldiers practicing what they called tactical joke deployment and strategic pun placement. One scene demonstrated how to defuse tense situations with well-timed one-liners. Walker added her own report. The Imperial Cultural Ministry just released their first officially sanctioned meme collection. They're calling it LOLs from Beyond the Stars. The transformation wasn't limited to the military. Across the Empire, citizens were discovering the joy of laughter. Comedy clubs opened on every imperial world, though they were still working on understanding human humor. One popular imperial comedian's biggest hit was, "Why did the quantum particle cross the space-time continuum? Because it was quantum ly possible." Not everyone found it funny, but the fact that they were trying was what mattered. The Empire's diplomatic corps underwent perhaps the most dramatic change. Instead of threatening other species with destruction, they now attempted to establish relations through shared laughter. Their first contact protocols now included a section titled "Breaking the Ice," using humor to make friends, not war. Back on the flagship, Bob received a transmission from the Imperial Council itself. With some trepidation, he opened it. "Dear High Commander," he read aloud to his staff, "after careful consideration of recent events, the Council has decided to officially rename our civilization. We are now the United Galactic Community. Note, this is not a joke, though we understand why you might think it is." The message continued, "Furthermore, we are pleased to announce the creation of the Department of Joy and Laughter, tasked with ensuring our society never returns to its former humorless state. P.S. Please forward more of those cat videos. The Council finds them most enlightening." Admiral Reed, upon hearing the news, gathered his crew for an announcement. "Well, people, it seems Operation Punchline has succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. We came here expecting a war and instead started a revolution, with jokes." "Sir," Walker interrupted, "incoming transmission from the the United Galactic Community Fleet. They're challenging us to a joke-telling contest." Reed smiled. "Now that's the kind of arms race I can support. Lieutenant Smith, prepare our best material. But remember, we're not trying to win anymore. We're trying to make friends." As the human fleet prepared for the first Intergalactic Comedy Championship, Reed couldn't help but think that this was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement, teaching an entire civilization how to laugh. 1 year after Operation Punchline began, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The former Imperial Palace, once a symbol of rigid authority, had been converted into the universe's largest comedy club. Its grand halls, which once echoed with serious proclamations, now rang with laughter every night. Admiral Reed stood at the podium during the first Galactic Peace Summit, looking out at an audience that included both humans and former Imperial citizens. Behind him, a banner proclaimed, "Peace through Punchlines, 1 year of intergalactic harmony." "When we first encountered the Empire's fleet," Reed began, "everyone expected a war. Instead, we got something better. We got a cultural revolution powered by dad jokes and cat memes." In the audience, Bob, who had kept the nickname even after learning to laugh, nodded in agreement. He now served as the head of the newly formed Department of Galactic Entertainment, his office decorated with Earth posters and a desk plate reading, "I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you." "Our latest surveys," Reed continued, "show that humor has improved every aspect of former Imperial society. Productivity is up, conflicts are down, and diplomatic relations have never been better. Though we're still working on explaining to them why humans find rubber chickens funny." The presentation screens behind him showed the statistics: workplace satisfaction up 500%, diplomatic incidents down 90%, and an unprecedented 1,000% increase in intergalactic tourism. Apparently, everyone wanted to visit the civilization that had conquered an empire with comedy. Lieutenant Smith, now promoted to head of Intergalactic Cultural Exchange, presented his own report. The integration of humor into former imperial society has led to some interesting developments. They've created their own unique brand of comedy, mixing their natural love of order with their newfound appreciation for chaos. He played a clip of a popular United Galactic community comedy show, "Why Do Imperial Ships Always Travel in Straight Lines?" Because they never got the point of a curve. The joke was terrible by human standards, but the fact that they were trying, and laughing at their own past, was what mattered. Walker, who had become the lead instructor at the newly established Academy of Comedic Arts, shared her experiences. Teaching humor to a species that spent millennia being serious is challenging, but rewarding. Though we did have to explain that knock-knock jokes don't actually require physically knocking on anything. The biggest change was visible in everyday life across former imperial space. Cities that once displayed stern propaganda now showcased digital billboards with daily jokes. Children were encouraged to play and laugh, rather than maintain rigid discipline. Even the notorious Imperial March had been remixed into something called the Imperial Shuffle, complete with funny dance moves. As the summit concluded, Reed made one final announcement. "Today, we're launching the first joint human galactic entertainment network, Universal Comedy Central. Our first show will be, When Empires Learn to Laugh, a documentary about how humor saved us all from war." Bob took the stage next, showing how far the former empire had come. "You know," he said, adjusting his "Galaxy's Best Reformed Serious Person" hat, "we spent thousands of years trying to conquer the galaxy through force. But humans showed us something better, they showed us how to conquer hearts through laughter." The audience erupted in applause and laughter as Bob attempted his first public joke: "Why did the serious empire fail to conquer Earth?" Because they didn't get the punchline. It wasn't the best joke ever told, but it represented something profound, the complete transformation of a civilization. As the celebration continued, Reed sat with his old crew from the Jester, now heroes of the piece. "You know what the best part is," he mused, watching humans and former Imperials sharing jokes and stories. "We didn't just prevent a war. We created something better, a galaxy where different species can laugh together." Smith raised his glass in a toast. To Operation Punchline, the mission that proved the pen might be mightier than the sword, but a good joke beats them both. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other serious civilizations were about to learn an important lesson: never underestimate a species that responds to threats with memes. Because in the end, the best defense isn't a good offense, it's a good sense of humor.